Right, today's video is going to be a shortish one, in intent at least. What I'm going to be doing is sort of a quick guide to help other cool players stop making the same mistakes over and over again in 9th edition. I'm going to be honest here, the reason I got into this idea is because I keep seeing stuff like battle reports on YouTube or other tactics, suggestions on forums or Reddit or God knows where. And I keep reading, hearing this stuff, and I'm shaking my head like, get with the times. We're now halfway through 2021 and you're all peddling ideas for strategy and army lists that barely worked 3 years ago, let alone in the current meta. So if you want to survive in 9th, you've got to get out of that old 8th edition mindset, quick time. It will not hold up. Sure, if you're playing friendly games against people who are running equally outdated stuff, or maybe you both like playing thematic games where, you know, that doesn't really matter anyway, then fair enough, do whatever the fuck you want. But I'm going to take a big fat guess that the majority of people want to be able to play competitively, go to tournaments and stuff, and have a fighting chance. So I'm going to cobble together all of my 9th edition Genestealer knowledge and try to form a little quick tip guide. Do's and don'ts, you could say. You've probably heard me mention a lot of this stuff in other videos, but I think sometimes it helps to get them all in one place, especially for newbies. So whilst I'm talking today, I'm going to do something a little bit different and have my painting going on in the background. Should give you an idea of how I go about detailing my minis. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a master when it comes to this part. I mean, obviously I'm happy with my work, but I'm under no illusion that, you know, I'm firmly in the mid-tier category with it. At the moment, I'm working on a 10-man squad of hybrid metamorphs, which I've converted from Necromunda Corpse Grinder gang sets. A bit of mix and match with the heads from Aberrants and Acolyte hybrid boxes, you know, for the hand flamers and the cool icons, stuff like that. I think the main reason I want to do this is to set my metamorphs apart from the standard Acolyte squads, as otherwise they basically look pretty much identical and you can forget which one's supposed to be which, you know, in which group. My painting process is a base spray of white, followed by a silver dry brush on all the armor parts, so it shows through on the next part, which is a contrast over with Bascalium grey. So I do the pants and any cloth in the same grey contrast, and then it's onto the skin, which for me is a 4-tone process, starting with Kane flesh, then it's Ungor flesh, I think it's called, for the yellow muscle tones, and then flayed flesh for the highlights, and then lastly I wash over it all with Crimson Caraborg red, which gives it that beefy, steroided up kind of look. One tip I'd say I learned here is just when you're using a shade, it works best if you really put on small amounts at a time. What I used to do is slap it on like crazy, you know, just like a wash, and assume that I would do it, and the minis just end up looking wet and shiny. It just sits in all the creases too heavily. So don't do that. I'll often highlight parts of the armor with Retributor Gold to give some warm rusted tones with a bit of like Norn oil afterwards. Then any straps, belts and boots with Black Templar contrast. After that, it's pretty much odds and sods with whatever flavour I want to add. I'll do a lot of red for lapels and, you know, key spots like, you know, drapes of cloth and flags. It's pretty much, you know, my army's flagship colour, but for the most part, almost everything is done with Bascalium grey contrast. I love that paint. I really didn't want a bright army that just looks obnoxious on the tabletop. You know, these boys are wearing salvaged mining gear, not fucking Man United kits. So stay tuned to the end anyway, as I'm going to be going over some of my recent game experience and some other shit too. So for now, let's get back to the tactics, or should I say my what not to do guide. Starting with the most important one, stop deep striking. Oh my god, I'm so fucking sick of hearing about Genestealer's ability to deep strike. This topic got so blown out of proportion to the point where 99% of 40k players literally only know this about the faction. It's like, you know, in their mind, it's the only thing they can do. Yes, Genestealer can deep strike everything. Does that make it a good idea? No. Deep striking something should be reserved and used on occasions where it makes sense to do so, not thought of as this surprise gotcha move that is going to swing battles in your favour. It doesn't do that anymore. I mean, I'm not sure if it really ever did. But, you know, if you turn up to a game with Genestealer, the other player is going to immediately think of all the shitty advice they've seen online regarding this faction and go, oh, you can deep strike lots, can't you? That's what they'll assume your game plan is. The cat's not just out of the bag, it's practically in Mexico by now. You'll actually surprise them more by, you know, allocating nothing to deep strike, because then they won't have a clue what you're planning to do. You know, let's look at what people usually use deep strike to achieve. In our case, number one, probably some kind of melee threat like Aberrants or maybe Acolytes with mining tools. 2, for primary objective grabbing or to get behind enemy lines for completing secondary objectives. 3, hand flamer bombs, you know, dropping down 10 or 20 Acolytes and just toasting something. 4, Atalan Jackal's demolition charges. Or 5, maybe for bringing in assassins like the Kelemorph or the Sanctus to, you know, kill off a key character. I'll say that using deep strike for objective grabbing and sorting out your secondary objectives is still an absolutely key strategy. Yes, if you're doing this, you're doing it right. Give yourself a pat on the back. Having between 2 or 3 little squads to drop in and do this stuff is great. It shows that you're playing to the mission and correctly utilising the faction strength to earn yourself points. I mean, a unit of 5 acolytes is less than 50 points. They can drop in, they do their task, and then you're one step closer to victory. Sadly, most players are still thinking about deep striking for their offensive reasons. So I would suggest get out of this mentality as soon as possible. You need to learn to get your troops into combat starting on the board. I mean, this is very tricky when they're not in the slightest bit durable and likely to get shot at a lot before they can get into position. But you've got to learn. And, we'll cover that later. Relying on deep strike is handicapping yourself. And you know what? Most of the time, it doesn't even let you achieve what you want anyway. There's so many ways for it to be denied or prevented. So let's say you're up against Marines or Ermac or Eldar, and there's probably more. They've all got ways to instantly shoot you as soon as you appear from deep strike. So it's game over already. Let's say you're up against a Horde army. Straight away, that means that there's going to be very limited space for you to fit in any of you guys in between the 9-inch zoning bubbles that all their models create. Board sizes are small in Aaron, but you might be able to fit your boys in. But if it's not in the place that you want to get a key target, then it's pointless. You may say, oh, we've got excellent stratagems like lying in wait or a perfect ambush. Well, for a start, you can't charge after using lie in wait. So, that limits its use. It's very handy if you think you can squeeze small squads into areas that will score you backfield primary objectives or something like that. I've done it plenty of times. It's great. But it's still expensive for 2 CP. And that leads us on to perfect ambush. It's the ultimate waste of CP. I mean, at 3, it's just ridiculous. I had to wean myself off this stratagem when 9th came in, because in the past you'd probably use it, once every turn. That's why Genestealer were known for deep striking, because if you ran 3 detachments, you'd have up to 18 or more CP. I'm pretty sure you get 20 something. I can't remember now exactly, but basically enough for you to cheese this stratagem until the cows come home and still have room for dessert. Now, I suppose you could factor in using it almost, maybe 2 times in a game now. I barely ever use it once. What you're paying 3 CP for is just the ability to almost ensure a melee gang gets into combat without being shot first. And when I say almost, I like to draw people's attention to the fact you could very easily roll a 1 after you pay your 3 CP. And then all you've done for that price tag is shave 1 inch off your deep strike charge, which is hilarious. I said before, this stratagem needs an urgent rework. It should just ensure you 6 inches of movement after popping up. But for now, it is what it is. Most of the time, let me tell you this. Going to all that trouble is very rarely worth it, unless the enemy player has got some huge vulnerable Lord of War style model you got to deal with, or is hiding something really important at the back behind the vanguard. This whole deep striking plan is not as game changing as you would expect. You might kill what you intend, but then the chances are your guys are stuck out in the middle of nowhere with no support, and they just get mopped up the next turn. And when I first started playing, I always loved the idea of deep strike armies, like my second faction, Tempest of Science, because I had this inbuilt, style in my head that I carried over from every other game that I play, like, RTSs and tactical shooters, right over into when I go airsofting. I always believe strongly in the theory of a hard flank maneuver. You get behind enemy lines and you come at them from angles that subvert their expectations. But the sad thing is, in 9th edition, I just don't feel like it works anymore. What you've got now is a battle for ground control, World War I style, and dominance of the middle of the board. You'll fare so much better if you push up and take flags the old school way, rather than trying to be a clever bastard and doing fancy combat drops behind enemy lines. Take it from me, sometimes it works, sometimes. Most of the time, they achieve one thing maybe, and then it falls flat on the face. So my next point, the Atalan Jackals. This is going to pain me to say, because I do love the Jackals. I love how they look and the whole idea. I just wish they were not so crap. Realistically, there's 2 ways you can look at these dirt bike gangs. One way is still kind of viable. The other is just a relic of 8th edition again. It's just like so many things in our codex, it's outdated. So what I'm talking about here is the fabled biker bomb, as it came to be known. The idea in short is that you would deep strike your Jackals, have them pop up within grenade range using line in wait, throw 5 demolition charges, and then they could move away to safety after using another stratagem. So straight off the bat, to use this tactic, it was going to cost you at least 4 CP, which is, stupidly expensive. That's 2 CP for line in wait to get them within the 6-inch grenade throw range. Another 1 CP for extra explosives, that's what allows them to throw up to 5 charges. And then there's the optional fourth, which you need to be Rusted Claw to use, and it's called Drive-By Demolitions, which gives you +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and it allows the second move afterwards to get your boys back into cover. Now, there's a few reasons why I think this tactic is a big steaming pile of piss. First of all, the damage itself. If you want a very easy comparison of what to expect, think of each demo charge as a Lehman Russ battle cannon, which, as we all know, doesn't cut the mustard anymore. So it's D6 throws or hits to make, strength 8, a little bit higher AP at -3, and D3 damage. There's just so many variables there. You might roll a poor amount of throws on the D6 part for all of your bikes. You might roll poorly on the D3 damage part at the end. You know, it's Murphy's Law. It's probably going to happen when you really need it to do more. You're going to roll shit ones. The thing is, your Jackals are ballistic skill 4. It's crap. Now, you can use the Rusted Claw stratagem to get them to a 3+ here on the ballistic skill, but in the old days you could stack that on top of the Jackal Alpha's +1 buff, so they'll be hitting on 2s. Not anymore. 3 is not bad, but you're still going to miss a few. There's no reroll 1s. And then there's the price tag in the first place. A demo charge is 10 points. 10 points. You can only use it once. It's a total rip-off. If you flop the first attack, that's it. No second chances. It's 110 points for a 5-man biker gang with explosives. You know, if you just spend some more points, you can have a 10-man Acolyte squad with flamers and mining tools, and they'll actually do proper business for you. Now, here's the thing. If we stop thinking about Jackals as damage dealers, and let's say more as like a biker horde idea, then we might actually have something worthwhile. This is totally theory, mind you, because I haven't had a chance to try it out yet. You know, I certainly will do and get back to you all. At home, I've got 20 Jackals ready to go, and I'll probably need another 20 for this, or I guess I can try it online with Tabletop Simulator first. The idea is a max size Jackal squad of 15 currently costs 220 points with no upgrades. You can cram in 12 bikers and 3 quads. Bikers have got 2 wounds, quads have got 3, all 14-inch movement, toughness 4, and inherently -1 to hit in the shooting phase because they're speedy bastards. So think of it as like a board control squad, not as attack units. Maybe then you're onto something. Okay, let's move on. Transports, use them. I've gone on about the Goliath trucks before, so you should know that I love them. Easily one of the best transports in the game. They're fast, they're relatively tough, and they're cheap. And when I say they're relatively tough, I mean for the points that you pay for them. You know, weapon-wise, okay, they're not going to do much, but they'll always do something. Autocannons are reliable damage dealers that will work against most armies, and if you bring along a Jackal Alphas, you could have them all hitting on 3s, so that's not bad. The real reason you should be bringing these is obviously to get your guys into combat. Having 2 or 3 trucks in your list means that you can start turn 1 confidently knowing some of your boys will be safe from small arms fire. These are what you should be using instead of doing all the deep striking bullshit. They may not seem tough on paper, but let me tell you, they are tough. It's the inbuilt rugged construction rule, which gives you a feel no pain of 6, and it always saves them. I mean, maybe not against things like, you know, Eradicators and Retributor squads, but everything else will struggle to get rid of them. It always surprised me. And the one other thing I find strangely prevalent is that the enemy often doesn't realise just how disposable they are, because in my experience, a lot of players will perceive them as a big threat. Even after they've dropped off the assault squads, which are my real beef units, they still focus a stupid amount of fire on the trucks. I mean, once my squads are out, the trucks are little more than a distraction or a suicide unit. I'll charge them into enemy vehicles to tie them up. I'll soak up nasty overwatch before my infantry charges. I'll park them on objectives. I'll use them to block pathways between ruins to stop an enemy advance. Whatever I need them to do. Because after that squad is out, they're 100% disposable. And seriously, it's great to have a handful of units that can just do that kind of work for you. Okay, next point. Stop using shit creeds. I made a whole video about why I think Bladed Cog is an overrated and frankly poor choice. I'm not going to repeat myself here, just go watch that video, guys. But the same goes for other picks like Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, Rusted Claw, etc. Frankly, apart from a few little saving graces, I can't see any reason why anyone would choose anything but Twisted Helix. Think about it this way. Toughness 5 Orcs are coming. Toughness 5 Plague Marines are very common. Custodes and Gravis Marines are everywhere. The list goes on and on and on. You'll thank Twisted Helix's Strength 5 Acolytes when you're coming up against stuff like that. It really does make the difference. As I've said before, Genestealer need to hit hard when they connect with the enemy, because if you don't wipe them out, the counterpunch that comes back is going to make a mess of you and you won't recover from it. You've got to go all or nothing. The first hit has to count. So coming back to the deep strike thing, the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor is a creed that tries to support this playstyle. You know, if you're going to take my advice and step away from this outdated strategy, you'll have no doubt in your mind that it's totally useless. Reliance on characters. You know, have you ever played a game in 9th and the other player just picked the assassinate secondary against you? Well, let me tell you now that Genestealer Cult hates it, because we have so many cool characters, way more than any other faction, and it's so tempting to take them. But this secondary objective will punish you for it, because not only do we have lots of characters, but they're also remarkably easy to kill, especially if they've got no bodyguards around. Perfect example is the Kelemorph. You know, he's everyone's favourite, or at least he should be, in theory. No other faction gets a 3-armed alien cowboy gunslinger. You know, the rule of cool here. But sadly, chances are, if you do the classic pop up and shoot thing with him, even if he kills the target, he's just left out in the open, in the middle of nowhere next turn, and he will get Swiss cheesed. He's 80 points. It's not cheap. You're not only throwing those points into the wind, but you're also giving your opponent free victory points, basically. In my old list, I'll typically field like 8 characters. It was just getting silly. I'll take the Broodcoven, that's the Patriarch, the Magus, the Primus. I'll take the Kelemorph, the Clamavus, the Icon Warden, the Abominant, even the Biophagus and the Sanctus too sometimes, because so many of them need each other to work as well as they could. And my mind is very all or nothing, as I mentioned before. You wouldn't bring the Abominant unless he had the Icon Ward to buff his Feel No Pain, the Biophagus to buff his stats. You need the Primus to make him hit on 3s. You need a Psycho around to make sure he can advance and charge. Without these things, I just feel like the characters won't perform to their best. And if that's the case, why bother taking them? Just strip them out, fill in with more acolytes. And that is the mindset I'm at currently. More wounds on the table, more bodies, and just much more chance of snatching primary objectives. Okay, stuff not to use. So rather than go over each shit unit individually with a big explanation, let's just compile them into one big list of shame. Brood Brothers, don't do it. That goes for the heavy weapons teams, the infantry, the Lehman Russ, the Chimera, Sentinels, all of it. Stick to actual Genestealer Cult units that can benefit from the creeds, like the Neophytes and the Goliath trucks. Pure Strain Genestealers, even with the points drop last week, they are still pants. They don't have the strength needed to fight modern high toughness infantry, like I mentioned before, Death Guard, the New Orcs, Custodes, Gravis Marines, you name it. They also do not have enough base attacks to feel like a true mince machine unit in melee. You know, plus they're not objective secured troops like their Tyranid counterparts. They're absolute dog shit. Acolyte hybrids with rock cutters. Some people will disagree with me on this one. I'm going to stick to my guns. They are very specialized. They're specifically designed to kill high wound elite infantry like, you know, Terminators, Custodes. However, I still feel like rock drills will do it better and also excel at almost everything else in the game. With rock cutters, you're only going to hit on 4s unless you've got a Primus around. That's a big problem. It means that, you know, you can't get away with sending them into a fight without him there. 2 characters I'm not a big fan of, the Nexus and the Locust. The Locust always dies before he achieves anything. Tell me if you've ever managed to win a fight with him. His bodyguard rule is worse than the standard unquestioning loyalty ability. But to be fair, you know, he is almost the cheapest character in the book. At 45 points, you could argue it's not breaking the bank, but ultimately it's fat you could cut from any list. As for the Nexus, his blip movement skills are really subpar. You can only do 1, and anything you can do with stratagems instead. His CP regeneration abilities themselves are nice, but let's face it, at most, you're only going to get back maybe 3 to 4 CP if you roll correctly throughout the game. He's got absolutely no other skills or abilities outside of it, so for 55 points, he's a total rip-off. It should be maybe 30 or 40 at most. Now, lastly, I'm going to say something that will really go against the grain. I'm not saying don't use them, I'm just saying don't believe the hype. I do not think Ridge Runners are that good. Everyone else online seems to think they're amazing or, you know, the best thing in the codex. I really don't see it. I'll agree they're okay, but again with the mining laser loadout, I think there's too many swingy elements. D3 shots, you'll probably roll a 1, and then damage D6, you can, you know, roll low again. It's just the way of the world, let's be honest. In this day and age, you need something that can deliver reliable levels of damage. You need to know that your surgical strikes are going to achieve their goals. They need to be surgical. Anything less, and you're leaving yourself open. Their saving grace comes in the forms of being fast, not degrading as they take damage, and the flare launcher, which gives them the feel no pain of 6. And the fact they come in packs of 3, so you can apply buffs nicely to them as a group. My overall feeling is they're alright, but they won't turn the tide of a battle in the way that a good crunching acolyte gang will. So yeah, that's pretty much it for my roundup of today's tips and advice. So I've got some other news now. So currently I'm hosting an online 40k tournament. It's 32 players. I'm taking part myself as well. I just won the first round bracket matchup against Custodies last night, which is rare for me because I absolutely hate going up against Custodies. To be fair, my opponent was relatively new to the game with maybe 3 or 4 months experience under the belt, but still, Custodies is just one of those factions that Genestealer cult really seems to struggle with, especially my melee focused build. So I've been trying to, do the idea that I suggested in my last video, which is the 3 detachment list comprised of the main Twisted Helix Assault Corps, and then a patrol of Kronos with Hive Guard, and then a patrol of Brood Brother Scions with some big Bulgarian, boys to back them up. So this is only the second match I played with the list. I had one quick practice against Admech before the tournament, which was a brutal victory as well. So thus far, I'm really liking it. Last night, I didn't even get to use the Bulgarian. It was over halfway through turn 2. My rock drill gangs butchered all the jet bikers. Hive Guard picked off the Custodians holding backfield objectives. And the highlight was using my Patriarch to mind control the opponent's Telemon Dreadnought, which I then turned around and he used to blow his Warlord Trajan Valoris off the table with all its crazy firepower, which was really good because, I'd chosen the cut off the head secondary, which gave me 10 instant secondary points in round 2. Now, I've got to say, I am really loving mind control again. This power is so good against armies with a singular big unit that boasts a lot of big guns. In the last tournament I played, which I won, in the semi-finals, I used this on a Knight Crusader and the effect was just priceless. You're basically getting the ability to add over 500 points of the enemy's pure brutal shooting into your own army every time you cast it. But with my next matchup, I'm against Sisters of Battle. However, loads of melt guns, immolators, exorcists and whatever. So I suspect my Goliath trucks won't last very long on the board in that game unless I get first turn. This one's going to be interesting, so I'll let you know how it goes. Finally, I did have another video recorded of my Patriarch Super Tactics video. However, I had a lighting rig set up in my room that cast ridiculous shadows across my face and made me look like a bit of a dickhead. So, yeah, I think I'm going to re-record that one. I appreciate it's much more interesting watching me talk to the camera rather than giving a boring background static image or whatever. But, I'm pretty vain, so yeah, I want it to look right and it takes time. So tune in next time. I'll probably still not cover Cult Ambush again. I promise I will one day. There's a lot to cover there. So thanks for listening. See you soon.